welcoming the stranger, welcoming that which is strange within us, welcoming that which is strange outside of us. The people of Israel were strangers in a strange land, and God brought them in. And he says, do the same. You do this now. And so I think, honestly, like Christian or not, like if you're a leader, I think your organization will be much better if you're seeking these types of ways of being with others and working to facilitate them in your organization. You're probably going to have a much healthier organization.
Welcome to the 1110 Leadership Podcast, where we tackle issues at the intersection of leadership, faith, and culture. I'm your host, Rob Shields, Vice President of Strategy at 1110 Leadership, and I'm joined by my co-host, founder and CEO of 1110 Leadership, David Spickard. Proverbs 11:10 lays out a bold and countercultural vision. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. We're here to ask, what does it look like practically to be this type of leader? Leaders willing to invest everything they have so that everyone around them can thrive. Join us on the journey as we lean in, listen, and learn how to become Proverbs 11:10 kind of leaders. The kind of leaders that make our cities rejoice. David.
Hey, Rob.
Have you won any more medals at the state fair since we last talked?
I have not.
Wow. Okay. Come back down to reality a little bit. Huh?
Yeah, like we said last week, I peaked.
You can't sustain it. No, Your son won one as well, though.
Yes, he did. He did. So, he got third place in cookies, and he did that out of 64 entries, which is huge to get third place out of 64 entries.
Man. Yeah, the Spicker family just has the secret sauce when it comes to sweets. I love it. I love it. We talked about proximity, the power of proximity last time with our friend Paul. I'm thankful that I am proximate to the Spickard family because I sometimes get the benefit from these leftovers.
Yeah, our
you
neighbor
won't share the ingredients in the recipe with me, but you'll share the leftovers.
Yeah, if we did that, we'd have to kill you. But otherwise, our neighbors over the years have loved Fair Week because they get the leftovers.
They have batted cleanup for you, and they're not moving. They're not moving. They're going to follow you if you move out of the neighborhood. They're going where you're living. That's great. I am really excited for our conversation today here on the podcast. Man, we've got an incredible guest who's joining us, someone who we've seen their work here locally in Raleigh up close and seeing the impact that it's had. Dr. Jason Young will be joining us. Really compelling conversation. Excited for people who aren't familiar with the work that he's doing through his counseling program and through the program he's going to tell you more about that he's doing with leaders. Jason has been a psychotherapist since 1997 and has worked kind of full-time private practice since 2005. David, we talk about the importance of mental health and health in thriving in our work with business leaders. And today's conversation is really going to be coming at this from a unique approach, getting Jason's insight into the health of a leader and really how vital it is, the things that leaders should be thinking about, the things that they're currently struggling with. This was a really both a high-level conversation that felt like it was 10,000 feet, but then also got really close to the ground, directly informed by Jason's experiences one-to-one in his therapy and counseling of leaders over a really long, extensive counseling career. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I think Jason comes at this really informed and really wise, but then also at the same time, innovating and thinking through new ways to engage his audience, which I thought was really encouraging.
Yeah, in this day and age, as leaders, we have to pay attention to our own health, our own mental health, as that has become more prevalent over the last years. And there's a reason for that. There's just a lot of what we've talked about in terms of the changing nature of our culture and what's going on outside of us and the stresses that are on us. I go back to our conversation with Michaela O'Donnell and how things have changed so quickly and how fast-paced things are, that we have to pay attention to our mental health. But then we also have to turn our attention to the mental health of those we lead. And that's become much more complex in our world. And that's easy for people to dismiss, particularly those of us who are older, who felt like we could handle it. We could handle, our life, or we were strong enough. And why are we having to always pay attention and be empathetic about people around us? Can't they be strong like we were back in the day? there's a bit of that goes around when we think about our leadership, and we have to be careful with that because it's so much more complex. And we have to really be able to see our people in order to lead them well. And in order for us to do that, we have to be aware of the mental health issues going on in them and in our broader communities so that we can lead and care for them.
Yeah, this is an important conversation. This is one that is so central to the heart of leadership. And so really thankful that we had the opportunity to talk to Jason and get his insights. And I think our listeners are really in for a real treat here. So we'll turn the floor over. Here's our conversation with Dr. Jason Young. Jason, welcome to the 1110 Leadership Podcast.
Great to be here.
We are so excited to have you as a fellow bearded person. We're really hoping that David gets on the train with us. You think he could join us?
I think he's got it. I'm not. We'll just have to see. Time will tell.
Jason's beard has been strong. You've cleaned it up recently. I noticed. So it looks good.
Yeah, it got a little unruly, so I trimmed it a little bit.
It's looking really good. I think a little positive peer pressure is good. Although David's got wedding season right now with sons getting married. So I don't know if he can afford to go scraggly. He needs to go the other way.
Oh, that's right. You got to tighten it up for the pictures.
Yeah, I'm on my A game. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, you do. It looks good, David. That's great. Jason, we're really excited to have you today. Thank you for spending this time. Looking forward to just hearing really just your story and kind of the insights you've gathered over a really long counseling career and just how that has evolved over time, how that intersects with so many of the topics that we've talked about here at the 1110 Leadership Podcast. I'd love to just dive straight in. You've spent now 2 decades counseling business leaders, not exclusively, but oftentimes people who are in the marketplace in some levels of leadership. I would love to just have you zoom out for us, almost like a 10,000 foot view. You're in the offensive coordinator booth. You've got some really unique insight for people on the field. What are some of the biggest issues that drive people into your office? What are those common struggles that you see? I know everyone's story is unique, but I imagine over 20 years, you've started to see some trends, and would love to just hear our listeners hear a little bit from you on the trends that you've been seeing.
Yeah, I like that analogy of in the booth. I often say in my work, as I'm working with men, mostly men, I work most of my work, is that the game always looks different on the field than it does from the stands. And so when you're in the game, as anybody trying to live a life on this earth is doing, it can get quite complicated. And one of the things I see regularly is the various effects of life transitions. That's a very common thing. It's, as I used to say to my kids when they were little, it's really hard being a human. Like, life just presents troubles on its own. We don't have to do a lot to make it hard. Now it turns out we do things that do make it hard, and things are done to us that make it hard. And yeah, broadly speaking, the things that I often see that people present with are, and particularly, it's interesting to think about it this way, that pre-COVID, post-COVID, there's a shift in a lot of ways. That's a much bigger discussion, but nevertheless, some of the same things that existed before seemed like kerosene got put on it, and it got more intense. So things like isolation, exhaustion, anger, and then out of those things, often anxiety and depression tend to emerge and then create a persistent state that people come into my office and they may not be able to articulate it this way, but they're at the end of their rope in some sense. I often like to say people don't come to therapy impulsively. It's not like getting a milkshake at cookout or something. You'll just pull in, and it's a complicated thing, and people try all sorts of other things before they come to therapy. And a lot of men I work with are midlife. And one of the ways I think about it is that often, like, the language of ambition and achievement, particularly for business leaders, but for all men, has left them perpetually discontent. And that discontentment creates a real sense of disorientation in their lives, and particularly very central questions in life. Who am I? Why am I here? How do I be in relationships that are life-giving? that in a man's 20s and 30s, ambition and achievement just baked in. This is what we do. And I don't have any critique of that necessarily, but at some point there's those kind of languages wear off or wear out. Then you throw in some of those life transitions, troubled marriage, or you got middle school kids who don't do what you say, the problems that create there. But life, as I say, like pinches in on a man. And so they don't, like, we all have to retool at particular times in our lives. And so therapy is often a context for that.
It's interesting to think about those qualities that you've described, the sort of a cocktail of isolation and anger with ambition and achievement that's then been accentuated because of our post-pandemic world, and how so many people are in a place where that disorientation, who am I, what my purpose is so much on the forefront. And I think, at least from our perspective, we see that being much more prevalent in these last, particularly 5 years. They were there before, but it's like you said, it's just gas has just been poured on all of that. So as you think about that for leaders that you're working with, Jason, how do they need to prioritize their own mental health? And what are some strategies that you've seen be effective?
Yeah, a few words that we've used, like isolation. It's interesting if you think about one of the primary, in the COVID world, one of the primary treatments or mechanisms for change was social isolation. It was to shelter in place, right? Stay where you are. Don't be around other people. I'm not a pandemic specialist, but relationally speaking and human development speaking, persistent isolation is toxic for humans. Like it's not, we're not designed for that. And very simply is putting yourself in relational contexts. Now, you throw in another kind of cultural dynamic, again, that's existed before COVID for sure, maybe as old as time, is the way in which men, and let's just talk about in our culture, men tend to be brought up in isolated ways. Like we're somewhat rewarded for this kind of stereotype of individual strength, that I don't need others. And over time, that really creates a relational kind of style that makes a man have a very difficult time with relational qualities that are needed, like vulnerability, like availability, just showing up to things, being responsive in a way that tells the story of his soul and hears the story of others' souls. As a mentor of mine likes to say, one of the key features to human growth and development is putting yourself in places where you can be found, where you can be seen, and where you can see others. So that's one. This other thing we've talked about it, and I often think about it in terms of midlife, is that the way I'll say it is that contentment is one of the chief developmental tasks of midlife. That developing a contented life is very important, because if a man doesn't do that, his later years are often very full of despair and more of this isolation that we talk about. And the guys, I've had guys over the years text me with pictures from Costco, because I'll say to them, if you want to build contentment, you need to put yourself in places that are you feel discontentment. Okay, eating line at Costco is one of those. So I would joke with them, get in the longest line at Costco.
Oh no!
And just be there, and let's evaluate how your body's feeling and all the cuss words that you're thinking or whatever about the thing. And there are many more like that. So there's a practice, I think. I'm just thinking like your question of the prioritization of mental health is something that you're going to do no matter what. Like we can frame it in that kind of language, but like people want to be healthy, I think, or at least we want peace in our lives. I know we will talk some later about spiritual formation, and everything we do is formational.
So the next time I go to Costco, I can't get in that most efficient line that I think is in front of me. and
That's right.
look at the people next to me and compete to see if I beat them or not because they got in the wrong
Yeah,
line.
you could do it that way. Yeah. Or judge them, like how look at these people, these discontented people.
I do want to ask you a follow-up question to that, Jason, is what would you say is really the barriers to contentment that you see?
Yeah.
Particularly like this midlife idea and how we get to this point in our lives. Many of us are there where you're thinking a lot about significance. Have I done enough? If I've not done enough to this point, how do I make sure I do enough before my time is up? All that.
Yeah. Yeah. You've used a really operative word, which is enough. And an examination of what is enough is really important in the development of contentment. Yeah. It's just all the systems around us are seemingly, if you ask a person how, in a business context, how much is enough money, let's say, or whatever, they'll likely say more. There's not a metric for enough. It's just growth, more. And so that brings in a real issue that I wrestle with in retreats I lead with guys, which is, I try to, from the beginning, put in front of them the idea that to let go of destination, to let go of, what is it? I'm not a business person, so I don't think in these languages, but return on investment, these types of things. What am I getting out of this thing? Part of letting go of destination is our relationship to time. Is a very common question I get from men about the retreats I lead or therapy is, okay, what's after this? That might be in the first meeting. Like we haven't even done anything yet, but they're so hardwired to think out ahead. So relationship to time is a really important one. And lines at Costco are at war with time. I mean, they are designed to try to get you out. And you want to know like a really interesting things, like when I've done this myself, is get in that long line and then they're going to come over to you and say, hey, sir, you can come over here and then do this. Say, no, I'm good, without being a jerk. Like I'm
Sure.
fine. I like this line. They will look at you like you're a crazy person.
No one has ever done that ever.
In a theological sense, God is the creator of time and he's not encumbered by it. And so to live a life that is in submission to who and what God is in this world, it is to be in some regular conversation with time and not let it be the ruler of one's life. And you'll see a person, and it's usually young kids or really old people. They don't, a mentor of mine who's now 80 would say once to me, I said something about, I don't, it's a standard thing. If we're meeting for coffee, I don't want to keep you any longer. I know your time's very valuable. And he goes, no, I don't have anything else to do. This is it. Okay, to a midlife person, I don't even know everything we're doing right now. I'm looking at a computer and I got a clock on it, and then I got a schedule, and we're going to have to end at some point. And so we're always in conversation with that.
Well, I'm going to try and push all the triggering, get in the long line analogies to the side because we've mentioned Cookout and Costco, and my problem isn't the contentment of I'd be fine to wait. It's just that when I choose the wrong line and watch how fast the line next to me moves, I inevitably never pick the right line. Without doubt, the one I get in is going to be backlogged until the cows come home. So I think maybe the Lord is just trying to really have me learn this lesson, Jason. And I guess I should thank you for bringing it back up. Yeah. So I guess that is a good transition to my next question. This feeling of out of your depth. I think it's really interesting that you're saying some of this out of depthness, if you will, is good because we need to almost deconstruct these systems. God exists outside of these constructs, and we want to join him. And the path to freedom and contentment is actually to realize that, man, we need to get out off the hamster wheel to a certain extent mentally. I'd like to shift gears a little bit from this idea of the health of the leader to the health of those they lead. At 1110, a lot of times we talk about this theory of change of thriving leaders, thriving companies, thriving communities, and that organizational health really starts with the leader. And I think that's the conversation we've had thus far. I almost akin this to like police officers responding to a mental health crisis when they're not really equipped for that. There's even programs now that are saying we really shouldn't send armed officers to a certain response that there's not a physical threat, but it's just more of a mental situation where we can treat someone differently. I think there's a metaphor there that works here of almost feels like business leaders are being asked to do things in which, hey, I was just trying to start a business, right? I'm just trying to turn a profit. And then now feel like being stretched or asked to prioritize not only their own mental health, but the mental health of those that they lead. What are some of the issues that you're sensing some of the people in leadership positions that you counsel are dealing with those that they lead? What are those health issues that are coming up for them? And what skills as leaders do they really need to navigate those issues well for their teams?
Well, they're the same issues they're dealing with generally. And there's a line I use from my early life revolved a lot around golf, competitive golf. And I was at this golf tournament once, and this one coach, he says very loudly on the range, if you didn't bring it with you, you ain't going to find it now. All right. I think under stress, you got to bring it with you. All right. These types of practices, getting yourself more rightly related to time, less, as I like to say with therapists I've trained over the years, regulating your own body and learning to regulate your own body. As I'll say to them, I said, you need to increase your freak out quotient. Like, how do you respond to things that are really off-putting or difficult from the people you're counseling, or in your example, people you're leading, because they're going to bring those things with them. There was a little stretch a couple of years ago. I was seeing this a lot in secular media, just a discussion about Sabbath, a discussion about rest. How is it that rest is important? What is rest? I find this a very hard question to answer for myself or anyone, but to ask a leader, what does rest look like for you? And so if they come into these situations with the folks they lead, if they're jacked up, everybody else is jacked up. And sometimes there's a fake it till you make it kind of reality. Like you're jacked up, but you got to just be strong and whatever. But yeah, regular rhythms of getting yourself ready, preparing yourself. It's amazing theologically and scripturally to look at the life of Jesus and see climactically, in a way, like the Garden of Gethsemane story, and the way his body is inundated with what looks like extreme stress. And he's able to go through that. And I would argue in many ways because he brought it with him. He was learning obedience. He was learning to listen to the Father. He was in these regular rhythms of rest and work and contemplation and silence. And so I think that's for me, and I think any Christian leader for sure, really regular contemplation of the life of Jesus and how Jesus leads, how Jesus is with people, and the way in which these practices seem to make a person more and more whole and integrated. Like we see the life of Jesus, and any of these challenges, they don't appear to disintegrate him. They don't appear to dysregulate him in a way that brings into question his identity. Stress for most of us at some point, right? There are triggers or things that you're going to hear, and it's going to bring into question these things, specifically to this question of leadership of, say, employees or whoever your people are leading. Is some of the obvious things that we live in a culture that really seems quite angry and exhausted. One of the things psychologically that's like psychology 101 is that people under stress, they have very predictable responses, and those tend to be fight or freeze. And we seem to be hardwired to avoid things that are threatening to us. Now, I talk a lot with people who are experiencing persistent anxiety, but these are not people who are waking up every morning with fear of being shot or some lion on the trail in their lives, actual threat to their lives. They're actually very safe. They might live in very safe homes and communities and other things like this, but they have this deep and abiding sense of threat that they're living with. So when a person does that, are also naturally inclined to start then forming very binary ways of seeing the world. It's either safe or it's not, good or bad, safe or dangerous. Another we see a lot in our world now, affinity or contempt. Like, am I in this group or is this group bad? And that the more contempt, like this is an outworking. John Gottman did a lot of research on this years ago, and just the role of contempt in relationship. But the more we see contempt in our culture, the more then we also see something that is like the objectification of others, the minimization of our own selves and the objectification of others. That then creates this context for all sorts of things that you guys talk and work with leaders on really wonderfully around injustice and condemnation and the violence that kind of comes out of that. So people are, any leader, they're going to have people who are wrestling with these things, the threats that they're feeling in their lives. And that people who live like this are chronically afraid, they isolate themselves, and then they really gravitate towards places of safety, which are usually like relationally places of sameness. Things that appear safe to them are often things that are like them. And that these behaviors over time really create a lot of isolation and just perpetuate these other symptoms that we see as mental illness. So I think one of the things, like within an organization that I'm sure you guys are working with guys all the time on, is how is it that you're facilitating experience with difference, with otherness? Like we see this scripturally in the Old Testament for sure, like with the, and then anyway, Jesus just takes it to a whole other level, but welcoming the stranger, welcoming that which is strange within us, welcoming that which is strange outside of us. The people of Israel were strangers in a strange land, and God brought them in, and he says, do the same. You do this now. And so I think, honestly, like Christian or not, like if you're a leader, I think your organization will be much better if you're seeking these types of ways of being with others and working to facilitate them in your organization. You're probably going to have a much healthier organization.
Hey, business leaders, are you and your team truly thriving? The Thrive Assessment from 1110 Leadership is designed to help you find out. This powerful 360 tool uncovers key leadership opportunities and challenges to help foster growth and help you build a thriving workplace culture. With insights into trust, health, relationships, impact, value, and engagement, you'll gain a clear understanding of where you stand and how to improve. But what sets the Thrive Assessment apart is the relational process. It's so much more than just an online survey. Our team walks with you through the results, providing support and coaching to help you and your team thrive together. Ready to take your leadership to the next level? Visit 1110leadership.com to learn more and start thriving today.
Jason, you're giving us words that I think give perspective for what many of our leaders experience and the depth of it. It's the kinds of things that we deal with or experience when we're leading the people that we're leading. We don't know what's really going on, but you've identified some key ideas that I think not only make those interactions make sense, but also highlight how difficult they are and how deep they are and almost complex. And for leaders, it could almost seem to be paralyzing to know how to navigate that because they don't feel skilled to know how to do that. But a lot of things we've talked about in terms of how leaders take care of themselves and think about their own health are real pathways for them to do that. And I know you are doing that not only in your counseling, but also in the ways that you're leading retreats. So I'd love for you to just give perspective on how you got here, just some of the things in your story that has led you to both the work that you're doing and just the insights that you've gained over time. And in particular, how that's led you to the 6 Stones program that you've put together, the retreats that are giving opportunities for, particularly for men, to come and have this time together to really live out what you've described so far.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Raleigh, and I was brought up in a Christian tradition that very much valued several things, but one was a personal relationship with Jesus. And then another, it was the kind of telling people about it. And the evangelism was very important. And the scripture was very important. But this idea of a personal relationship with Jesus was something that it just bugged me, particularly as I got to be a teenager. And I can remember very distinctly sitting in a prayer meeting, probably 17, 18 years old. And we were very passionately praying for our community and for lives to be changed. And I don't know, it seemed like maybe we went on for an hour. And I sat there and I thought, we have talked now for an hour. When does God talk? Okay, that was it. Okay, and it was angsty. I'm 17, 18 years old. I'm tired of it. I'm probably just tired of sitting there too, but whatever.
Your freak out quotient was lower.
Low, very low.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And whatever, I didn't have the language to know anything about the things of spiritual formation and contemplation and all that stuff. But that persisted for me. Meanwhile, I was just starting to figure out my life and what I wanted to do and be. And I just knew I wanted to help people in some way. I thought ministry might be the context for that, and tried a bunch of different things. And really thought the church would be the place that I would do that. Turns out I work a lot with churches, but not in a church per se. So I fast forward, I moved to Raleigh. We join a private practice and open an office for them in Raleigh. And my practice started really taking shape demographically as really working with men. And I like to say men are very slippery. They're hard to contain. I would work with a man and we would get to a particular place in his life and he might be asking something very similar, kind of that I was asking as a 17 and 18-year-old, which is basically like, there's got to be more to this life as a follower of Jesus and as a husband and father and all the things that men do. And I just had this real sense, I've got to get these men out of this office. Okay, now I didn't know what that was. I thought, I love backpacking and I love the outdoors, and I thought I'll take them out in the woods or something. Like I didn't know what. And so congruent with that, a good friend of mine, Steve Swain, he runs a retreat center north of Greensboro, and Steve's got his hands in all kinds of things. And I've learned over the years, if Steve comes to me with an idea, as a spiritual discipline, I listen, because usually it's like something going to happen. And so he said, listen, I got all these men coming to me and asking me questions about their lives. Do you have any, how can we help them? Just that. And so that got us talking about material that I had been working on, that David, you mentioned 6 Stones, which is the name of these retreats that I lead. And as I've referenced earlier, I used to train new therapists as they were getting licensed. Any therapist has to go through a series of a time period of supervision of their work as they get licensed. And so I was doing that, and this one woman got finished her requirements and got licensed and moved away. Her husband was in graduate school, and so I get this package in my office. If you ever came to my office, I have a lot of rocks. Okay, I collect rocks over different places I go and tell a story. And so she sent me these 6 river stones, each with a word engraved on them, each stone, and said, "These are the 6 words I learned from you." It was a profound gift, almost a word from God, like a prophetic word of sorts, and very special to me. But they were words that I used a lot in my work, at least thematically, but I'd never seen them all together. For a couple of years, I just sat with them and started trying to write about each word, and that was a pretty clunky process. But I started to see them as really forming a developmental trajectory for wholeness. And I've added a 7th word, which I'll explain, but those words are sitting, experiencing, holding, tolerating, walking, and voice. Those are the 6 stones. And just very simply, we've got to start from a place of sitting. We've got to start from a place of stillness. Most people under stress, they just go faster. They do what they know, they just do it harder. Spiritually speaking, I would argue, psychologically speaking, and even just if you're lost in the woods, be still, sit, okay, survey your surroundings and try to orient yourself, because all these things we've talked about, anxiety and all the stressors of this life, they create a profound disorientation. And that we see even in God's first question in Genesis, he asks Adam, "Where are you?" And on these retreats, we talk about the way in which And that's a profound question. There's a lot to that question. But one of the things is it's an orientation question. And he's asking him to participate in the orienting of himself and to identify and be vulnerable about where he is. Okay, so sitting. As a man sits or a person sits, inevitably noise comes, right? Our minds are not still. And so just because our body is doesn't mean our mind is. So we begin to experience, this is the second word, more and more emotion and the rage and the desire and all the grief and loss and all the things that we have as humans. And so as we do that, then there's the third stone is holding. We've got to get more proximal to it. We've got to begin to touch it and hold it. And we have to be in a context of being held so that this relational reality is always at play. Now the fourth word is tolerating. Just because you hold something doesn't mean that you have tolerance for it. So like this coffee cup that I have, it can hold 24 ounces or whatever it does. But it can't tolerate certain things, certain temperatures or whatever. I don't even know, chemical things. As we grow, though, spiritually and psychologically, we know we have to build more and more tolerance. And those two words together really are building capacity for a person. Then the fifth word is walking. And walking to me is a metaphor for discernment. As I've done these first four things, there's the question of, so what? What do I do with this? And to discern or to understand or hear God's voice really demands, I think, being more and more present to life on the field as we're doing it. Those retreats are lots of walking. The last word, the sixth stone, is voice. And voice is a psychological construct for identity, but it's also like the summation of the whole thing. We want to hear God's voice. Jesus says, I don't do anything that the Father doesn't say. Only the Father knows the time and place. But if you ask most people most conversations we have go to, what do you do and who are you and what do you do? And I'm arguing with this. You can't answer that question unless you do these first stones. You've got to put yourself in a place where you can begin to hear God's voice. The seventh stone, I don't even know what to call it. It's like mortar, really. I see it as it holds the whole thing together, is blessing. And this is where on the retreats that I lead, you see the most profound things happen, where each man's in a small group on the retreats, and we end each retreat with what I call a blessing group. And so we would go around, and your job is to sit there, be still, and each of us are going to come up to you and say a word of blessing to you about you. And your job is to look me in the eye and to receive it. And at most just say thank you, but no other thing. You just receive it. And so by the end of the 6 retreats, each man's in a group of 6 guys, he will have been blessed 30 times. Right? Most men, the 3 of us could get together and we might have a hard time finding 30 examples together of that type of blessing, that type of male to male intimacy. It's life-changing, and we're made for it. We're made for it. It's the beginning of Jesus's ministry is one of blessing. This is my beloved in whom I'm well pleased. Yeah. So that's I don't know. That's a bit of what we do.
That's good.
I thought I might throw in a book called The Critical Journey. It's a very useful construct for these 6 stages of faith. And men have really responded to this. And they talk about the first 3 stages are a recognition of God. There is a God. Stage 2 is what they call the life of discipleship, like learning God. Stage 3 is what they call the productive life, which is serving God. And then this is the way I teach it. There's a wall that happens. And this is usually midlife for a lot of men, but there's some kind of impediment. And what most Christian men do, I see, in what I was taught really, is you recycle the first 3. You just double down on, look, there's a God. I need to learn God, study God, and I need to serve God. And I keep doing that repeatedly. This is exhausting over time, right? And it's not exactly the context for intimacy. These are necessary skills. Like you do need to know certain things, but it's not the context for this kind of blessing experience. that we're talking about. So the fourth stage, though, once the wall is traversed or blown up, is what they call the inward journey. And the inward journey is where most of the men I'm working with are somewhere proximal to that wall, right? There's got to be more than these first three stages. And they may be quite angry about it. They may be quite exhausted about it. But there's some, and they may not even be able to articulate it that way, but there's some recognition of, I can't keep doing this. I want more. And so that inward journey, the way I often think of it is a deep and abiding recognition of your own belovedness. Like you are God's beloved, and that's who you are, your chief and central identity. And as that grows and matures in a person, there's this movement into this fifth stage, which is what they call the outward journey, where you start to really see everything as beloved. Like God is it's like ever expansive. And there's beauty in unbelievable places, even in our enemies, right? Even in those people that we objectify or we minimize. God's glory is shining out everywhere, as Abraham Kuyper, the theologian, said. Christ is constantly crying out, mine. It's all mine. It's mine. And so as a person who lives in that state, things really start to change. And the sixth stage is what they call a life of love. And I joke with the guys, I only know a few people like this, and they pretty universally just say that they're not that, but there's something different about them. When they walk in the room, it's not because of their good looks or their charisma, but like the room shifts. Yeah. They live in this state of belovedness. And yeah, man, it's pretty fun work, and it's fun to have a front row seat to seeing God move in these ways. And as I say to these guys, like, we all die beginners. Like, God is so remarkably infinite and glorious, and so we get to see bits and pieces of it this side of heaven, which is cool.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Jason. I think it's even fascinating that this episode will air sandwiched between a really contentious presidential election and then Thanksgiving holiday, right? So it's like, hey, we all need to be reminded of, I think, these journeys you're talking about, of eventually how do we see those categories that we've been conditioned to structure of, are you for us or against us, right? Are you on my side? Am I on the right side? Am I on the winning side? I want to wrap up our conversation today coming at that from a slightly different angle, this idea of having these two camps. You know, you mentioned the story of you having this angst of, when do we make a shift? And I think oftentimes, even from a faith perspective, we can split into camps and say, hey, we're on the side of the angels, and the side over here is the one that's wayward and deluded. I have found and experienced that sometimes this idea of the inner journey gets almost pitted against the outer love of neighbor.
Yeah.
As almost like a pick, one of them really matters more, or one of them is the only thing that matters.
Right.
And I have definitely been on that journey for myself of even being on the side of, oh, I'm going to love neighbors the right side, quote unquote. But then I end up hitting that wall you described, and I'm not all that loving anymore, either to myself or even to my neighbor, because I've neglected this inner journey. And so I've come back around to say, you know what, I think maybe which side is the right side is the wrong question, and that we really shouldn't pit these two things against each other. This idea of what matters more, spiritual formation or the pursuit of justice. Yeah. So I know that you come at that, and this is not even unique to even your journey, your wife, Mary, and the work that she does. I know this is a conviction of hers through her ministry of Journey Mates. So I'd love to just ask, as a follower of Jesus, how do we fight to preserve the both-andedness of that and avoid the either or? What does that balance look like? And then, you know, how do we, even this is a podcast for business leaders, how do business leaders live out those principles of wholeness and spiritual formation that you're talking about? How do they go on this inner journey while also simultaneously prioritizing the pursuit of justice in their context?
Yeah. Simply put, I would say that you can't have one without the other. They're not mutually exclusive. They animate one another. And just a simple just watching the life of Jesus, we see this. Like he goes to desolate places. He slips away. He is in conversation with his Father, and that gives life to his work. that gives life and power and meaning, presence to this work of all these complicated things he says and does behaviorally. It's an interesting, as you were asking the question, I thought, I wonder why we do that. Why do we separate these two? Like how in the world did that even happen? That we would see the work of God separate from intimacy with God.
Jason, you have touched on a lot of things. We could spend a ton of time unpacking so much of the ideas and principles that you've shared with us today. But if you were to give us a bottom line, what would a bottom line be for those listening? What's a first step? What's a next step? What's a small thing that they can take from our conversation today?
Yeah. Bottom line. I'm giving you the therapist pause here because I don't know what to say.
It's on brand. It's very on brand.
Yeah. It's not probably very good for podcast world, but start small. Just start small. God is not in a hurry. He just so desires to be with us, and in all these various contexts. And start small, go slow. I find people who are doing this work, like you guys. Be around the Davids and the Robs. And a person listening to this might say, I don't know anybody like that, or put it before God. These people exist. As my wife said this morning, she said, if people just scratch a little bit below the surface, there's so much happening. So much happening. And be around people who are doing it.
That's powerful. It makes me think of the Dallas Willard quote I heard through the John Mark Comer's popular book. He said, hurry is the great enemy of the spiritual life in our day. Yes. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Yeah. There is nothing else.
That's it. That's it.
That's a beautiful encapsulation of just exactly the sentiment you're saying and the things that you model through your ministry, Jason. If people want to learn more about the Six Stones program, how would they take a step to learning about an upcoming retreat and how they may get involved?
Yeah. So I have a website. I think y'all probably will post it.
Great. We can drop that in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We've got the cohorts that are going on. Our next one starts in December, but that one now is full and is ready to go. But we're going to do a couple, I don't even know what to call them yet. I've got to create some kind of flyer for these, but taste and see retreats. A guy says very clearly, I can't do 6 retreats. That's crazy or whatever. But I can do one. Right. So let me try this out. So that'll be the end of March of 25. This will be on the website as well. And then another one in end of August of 25. I'd say also to check out my wife's ministry's website, journeymates.org. That's a very useful website that has all sorts of resources. Think bibliography of all sorts of folks who write in this area. But then also they do what they call mornings apart. So they're usually like a Friday or Saturday, 9 to noon type of event where you get to experience some of these practices of silence and solitude and Lectio Divina and just a more contemplative reflection on Scripture.
What I'm hearing from you is there's ample opportunity to take a step, whether it's big or small, to really start to practice this unhurried journey and do it in the context of community, which is what you really, I think, made clear to us is this is not a solo. If you want to really, one of the best investments you can make into your own health and life and leadership is to find people to do this thing with and really practice this, because it's hard enough to do it in a group context. I would say near impossible to try solo. So Jason, thank you so much for the time. Really enjoyed having you on.
Yeah, it's been really fun. Yeah.
Awesome.
Good being with you.
To learn more about 1110 Leadership, visit our website at 1110leadership.com. That's the numerals 11, then spelled out TEN leadership.com. That's 11 TEN leadership.com. There you'll find more resources to equip you on the journey of becoming an 1110 leader. You can also get connected to our growing leadership network. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. To help others find us, you can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.